Okay, where we left off last time, Jefferson has just left office. He decides to run for 2 terms, and that's it. Follows Washington's precedent. He kind of leaves a little bit on a sour turn because the Embargo Act was a huge failure. He changes that to the Non-Intercourse Act, which means we can trade with every country except for British and France. Now, the new president, James Madison, is the president, but a country is going to, face a lot of problems, both internally, and externally, from internal threats and from foreign threats. Okay, let's start with talking about some of the conflict with the Native Americans. All right. Now, after the Revolutionary War, the British are out of the West. Well, actually, they were still kind of there, but nonetheless, it's our land. And between 1790 and 1810, 900,000 white settlers moved west of the Appalachians. All right? And the Native Americans obviously resent these guys because they're coming in and they're not living like the natives. They're chopping down the forest, they're plowing up the land, they're hunting in the animals, they're scaring off some of the animals that the natives need for food. So they are not happy. The natives are certainly not happy with this invasion. All right? Settlers had ignored treaties. There was treaties that had been signed between the government and these tribes promising them that land. But the white settlers come in, ignore it, and basically drove them off the land. So you start to see this conflict between these white settlers and the Native Americans. Now, of course, this is going to lead to violence and reprisals. There's a lot of innocent people killed by both sides. All right? And eventually, this is going to turn into a war. All right? So in 1791, Chief Little Turtle of the Miami tribe and Blue Jacket of the Shawnees went to war with the settlers. And here's the rub. They are being armed by the British. That's right. The British are like, hey, yeah, we'll give you weapons. Remember, the British are still up in Canada. So they are giving all the weapons they can to the natives to defeat the Americans. All right? Now, the natives drive the whites out of Ohio for a time. It looks like this is going to, be successful for the natives. But remember who's in charge of our country in 1794. George Washington. He won't stand for this. So he sends General Anthony Wayne, by the way, Fort Wayne, Indiana is named for him, to fight. Now the natives gather at a place that they call Fallen Timbers. This is where a bunch of trees have fallen down, probably from a huge storm or fire. I'm not quite sure exactly why they're all there. But it's just this tangle of downed trees. And they thought they were safe there. But Wayne's well-trained army was able to find the natives and defeated them at the Battle of Fallen Timbers, which is in Ohio. So in 1795, the natives signed the Treaty of Grenville. Okay? They had to give up Ohio, and we give them $20,000. That's nothing. Can you imagine $20,000 for the entire state of Ohio? You can't buy a new car for that. Okay? They promised them, hey, listen, hey, if you're good though, if you promise to behave yourself, Native Americans, we'll give you more money, which never happens. So the land of Ohio, which many white settlers want, joins the Union in 1803. So Ohio joins the Union in 1803. Okay, now it's a state now. Okay? Now, that's still not enough for the white settlers, though. We are getting to push west into more native territory. Now, there are two Shawnee brothers, Tecumseh and his brother they call the Prophet. These two guys vow to drive the whites out. The brothers had believed that the natives had become too dependent on white man's goods. Their trinkets, their mirrors, their beads, and especially whiskey. Okay? So they taught the Indians to go back to the old ways. You don't need any of this European stuff. You don't need any of this crap. Okay? Turn your back on it. Turn your back on the whiskey and the beads and the glass and the knives. You don't need it. Let's go back to our old way, and we will drive these white settlers out of our country. So in 1808, the brothers built this large settlement on the Tippecanoe Creek, which is in Indiana. Okay? Now, natives from all over the country moved to the settlement, and the settlement is called Prophet Town. Remember, Tecumseh's brother is called the Prophet. These brothers built these different groups, these different tribes, into a great confederation. Okay? Well, the governor of the Indiana Territory is a future president, and his name is William Henry Harrison. Okay? So he attacks Prophet Town. He is going to try to destroy Tecumseh and the Prophet and defeat the natives at Prophet's Town. Now, the Prophet, remember he's the brother, kind of led the surprise night attack against Harrison's army. You know, he knew they were coming, so he leads this night attack on it. Both sides suffered heavy losses, but in the end, Harrison's men, kind of win the battle, and the Prophet was killed. Okay? And this became known as the Battle of Tippecanoe. And this is going to really help William Henry Harrison later on. He's going to kind of capitalize on this victory at Tippecanoe. In fact, it's going to be his presidential motto, you could say, when he runs for president. It's called Tippecanoe and Tyler too, Tyler being his running mate. So Tippecanoe and Tyler too is going to help push him into the office of the president. All right? Now, the whites celebrated, we've beaten Tecumseh and the Prophet in Prophet's Town, and what? Tecumseh's not there? No. Tecumseh had been away. Okay? Tecumseh had been away, so we don't get Tecumseh. So this, kind of resistance by Tecumseh is going to continue. Now, we're going to start talking about this push towards war, okay? A push towards war with who? Britain. That's right. A push towards war with the British. Okay. Now, the fighting between the whites and the natives really damaged the United States and the British relationship because the British had been giving them weapons. All right? They'd encouraged the natives to attack the United States. I've heard stories about them paying bounties on scalps. You bring me a scalp, I'll give you $100. All right? So, even though the Americans are upset with the natives, they said, you know who's egging them on? You know who's behind this, don't you? It's the British. Now, remember the Non-Intercourse Act? Jefferson passed that right before he left office. That said, we can trade with every country except for France and Britain. Well, that's getting ready to expire. All right? So let's see how we can use this to our advantage. Now, Congress authorized the President, James Madison, to make this really kind of tempting offer. Okay, listen up, Britain and France. Whoever promises to stop taking our ships, we will trade with you. Okay? Remember, America has a lot of natural resources, a lot of things that these countries need and want. So, this is a tempting offer. And guess who jumps on it? Napoleon. Napoleon said, oh, yeah. I'll take that offer. So, America begins to trade with France and cuts off all trade with Britain. Okay? Now, we are going to trade with all countries in the world except for Britain. Now, this is really going to upset a lot of the New England merchants. Remember, they're the old Federalists. They had always kind of sided with Britain. They're not happy, and they want to restore trade with England. But the Southern congressional members called for war with Britain. Remember, the Southerners were primarily farmers who sided with the Republicans, who sided with France and against Britain. They call for war with the British. Okay? Now, these people who call for war, mostly the Southern congressional member, are known as Warhawks. Okay, Warhawks. And they kind of started this kind of sense of nationalism and devotion to the country. They also thought that if the British was still, the British were still treating us kind of like one of their colonies, that Britain is still looking down on us. Britain is still treating us like second-class citizens. All right? Now, the strongest Warhawk of all is a guy you're going to hear about a lot in the next several weeks. In fact, you're going to hear about him all the way up to the Civil War. His name is Henry Clay from Kentucky. He is the strongest of the Warhawks. Now, he has this idea that, if we go to war with Britain, it's going to do a lot of really good things for us. Okay? First of all, we could seize Florida from Spain. Spain is an ally of Britain, by the way. We could seize Florida. It would also discourage the natives, because the natives aren't going to have ability to get weapons and ammunition. And finally, this seems kind of like a big land grab, we could seize Canada, make Canada part of the United States, because everybody wants to be part of the United States. I'm sure those Canadians want to be part of the United States also, or so he thinks. All right? So in fact, he even says that I could take a bunch of my Kentucky militiamen up to Canada and defeat the British up there. Nothing to it. We're tough Americans. We'd be able to, just my Kentucky militiamen could defeat the British in Canada. We'll see how that works. Now, because the United States has made that agreement with France, kind of icing out Britain with the trade, Britain continues to seize ships and impress American sailors. Okay? The British begin to blockade some of the U.S. ports, which is an act of war, by the way. You blockade someone's port, that's an act of war. So in June of 1812, President Madison asked Congress for a declaration of war. Remember, the joint houses of the legislature branch, the House of Representatives and the Senate together declare war. So Madison asked Congress for a declaration of war, and he gets it. And that's where I'm going to leave you. I'm going to leave you right there. The United States has declared war on the British.